Hello everyone and welcome to the Artist Spotlight with myself, Simi Jackson, and this week I've got the wonderful Andrew Tischler as my guest. Andrew's a professional painter who many of you will know as he has lots of artists following him from all around the world. He's huge on all the social media outlets and particularly YouTube, where he makes lots of different videos that you can freely watch, but he also creates his own DVDs and sells those as well. And of course, when it comes to Rosemary Brushes, which I can't go without saying, Andrew developed the Tisch Dagger with us. Rosemary and Andrew developed that over several years. So I want to welcome my guest, Andrew. Welcome, it's
Excellent.
so good to have you here. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. I know that the time difference is pretty huge between us, so it's 8:30 in the evening here. What time does that make it for you?
Right now, we're coming up to 9:30 a.m.
Yeah, so with the time change as well, that's a big difference.
Mm.
Well, have you had a coffee? Because I've got a load of
Yeah.
questions.
I'm raring to go. Yeah, I'm caffeinated. I'm ready to roll.
Okay, I'm gonna hit it straight in because one of the first things when I learnt about you, I knew that you worked with your wife Rachel, and I wanted that struck a chord with me straight away because I wanted to really talk about the the difference and difficulties sometimes, but the pleasure you get from working with your wife, like I get working with my mum. So I wanted to ask how that came about. How did you decide to start that?
Wow, that's an interesting question. You know what? No one's actually ever asked me that
Really?
before. I mean, a lot of the people following me will know Rachel because Rachel's the one handling all of the customer service and all of the, the business side of things. She reckons I have the fun job, and maybe she's right. But I get to paint, and she gets to basically take care of me and take care of the business. But it started off quite, just slowly, bit by bit. I've been married to Rachel now, coming up on 10 years. We've been together for about 11, 12 years now, and she's my best friend. And I think that helps as well, just in terms of a working relationship and being around somebody for 24/7. She's
Yeah.
she's my best friend and a wonderful person, my favorite human being of all time. And I think, it just the dynamic has been quite interesting. But in terms of how it started, basically, I was a full-time artist when we met. I was 26 years old, and I was, selling work. I had, sellout shows. I was doing commissions. I was doing great, but I was working with a couple of galleries, and they were handling, the business side of things. And
Hmm.
we started to, try to find a home in Australia when we were still living over there. And so once I met Rachel, within a couple of years, we started moving all around, trying to find the spot that fit us. And as we did that, we started moving to more and more regional locations, out of cities, and so for a lot of years, we spent time around Melbourne. So we lived in a little town on the coast, beautiful spot called Barwon Heads. We lived there for maybe 2.5 years. And then for about the same amount of time, we then moved to Daylesford, which is a little gold mining spa retreat town north of Melbourne, a few hours out of Melbourne. And it was beautiful. But what the result of those kind of moves was, Rachel didn't really have a job, and she was working, at that point. And it's like, well, we were just starting the online side of the business, moving to YouTube. That's been about 5 years now, I suppose. And I suddenly realized I can't paint and sell paintings, and I was really starting to make those moves and going independent. And so I was having to handle a lot of the business side of things. And then with the online business on top of that, it became so apparent that I couldn't do that on my own.
Right.
And the thing is, Rachel just really, I mean, she stunned me because she was just like, well, we need a website. We need a much better website. She said, we got to build one. So we started looking for people that could do that. And then it became apparent that one, we couldn't afford it at the time to have somebody build that website. And two, we didn't know a damn thing about building a WordPress site or having plugins or HTML this or that. We had no idea. So what'd she do? She rolls up her sleeve and she teaches herself. And so she built it herself. And and then it's like, oh, well, we need more of a presence on YouTube. Well, we put a video up. It got a couple of hundred views. What's going on? She's like, oh, let me do some digging. I'll find out about it. And then she comes back a couple of days later. Well, I mean, she was still in the house. She didn't go away to do this, but she looks into it for a couple of days. And then she's like, oh, it's keywords, it's tags, and it's a title, and we need to improve our thumbnail. As soon as she did that, tens of thousands of views. You know, we put a video out on Facebook, and then she's like, oh, well, I think we need to do it this way. 1.5 million views on Facebook, you know, for our first little viral video. I had been on Facebook for years. I had a handful of followers, and then boom. Yeah. And this just comes down to, you know, the perseverance and the ingenuity of somebody just wanting to get in, roll up their sleeves and give it a go. Like, you know, she's so supportive, but I'm just such a fan of her. And I know right now, without a shadow of a doubt, I would not be where I am now doing what I'm doing if not for her. And I think the biggest thing when you're working with your significant other, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, we have our moments, but
it's so perfect. We all need a Rachel, but surely there's something. I mean, Mum and I drive each other nuts sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of that. There's plenty of that. But listen, if ever I need to know what the problem is, I just need to look in the mirror. I'm the one. I'm a temperamental artist. I'm the one that starts this stuff like 9 times out of 10, or 99% of the time, let's say. But no, it's just about you know, we have a job to do. We get our job done, and the other thing that really helps, and I guess this is just, you know, again, I forgive the expression, but the grace of God, I guess, that we've been able to. You know, this year, and when so many people are going through so much, we've managed to stay in business, and it's just because we've been able to pull together and just concentrate on the job at hand. And I'm so grateful for that. I know I would not be doing that without her.
So do you feel then like on an evening you can switch off from that? So it's easy for me more because I go home away from the workshop and I just turn my phone off if Mum calls me. No, I'm joking to an extent, but it does get to a point where sometimes I'm like, Mum sent a message, and on a weekend I know I can be a bit crass and not reply for 2 hours. If that was during the week, forget it. If it's not replied to within a minute, she's on my case. You know, do you have that sort of feeling on an evening where you just have to switch off, or?
I have to, I struggle so much with switching off, and I struggle with downtime because it's not something that's in my nature. I'm always thinking about painting. I'm always painting, or I'm thinking about writing something, or I'm scripting a video, or writing a treatment for something, or, you know, responding to maybe some emails or messages. Or I manage, you know, my Instagram, so I'm on Instagram replying to people, or making posts, or getting in the comment section. Like, there's always something to do. It's an endless list, and I have such a hard time switching off. But, you know, Rachel's constantly on my case about basically, you know, you need to have that downtime. And I think that this is a thing, especially, again, you know, this year has just been a particularly weird one, but I felt almost panicked to just stay busy, keep going. And you get burned out, you get really worn out that way. So just kind of, you know, illustrate that point a little bit. Like, Rachel just had her birthday, and so we went away for a couple of days to Queenstown, which is not too far from where we live, and stayed in a nice hotel. We had some restaurants booked, and we were just going to do nothing. And I can't think of anything worse than doing nothing. And I was just thinking, like, what am I going to do? 2 hours went by. We're 2 hours into it. You know, we drive there, it takes a couple hours to get there, and then we're sitting there, and I'm like, I'm going insane. She's just going, just stop, just stop. Andrew, relax. And then after a little while, I was like, okay, now I'm getting in the groove of this. And then it gets a little bit difficult to switch it back on again.
Yeah, I know it. Do you know, I'm so similar in that aspect, that I find it so hard to especially if you know that you're onto a brilliant idea. And forgive me for thinking this, but a lot of the time I think I'm on it, I've nailed it, we've got it, I can roll with it. And then when it comes to like home time, I'm thinking, but I don't want to stop yet. I've still got so much to do, So I find it really hard to switch off. But once I do switch off, I'm quite similar. Then I'm like, can't possibly be Monday. No, the weekend's still here.
The thing that it's interesting. I think artists and entrepreneurs. I mean, because I think artists generally are pretty entrepreneurial. We're creative thinking. We apply that creativity to business, and so there's always an idea that's going to be floating by that we need to capture and catch and hold on to it. Right. And this is the other thing about ideas. I mean, they're a bit like goals. I've read about this, and now I've adopted it as part of my personal philosophy. Is you never leave the sight of setting a goal without doing something towards its attainment. Mm-hmm. And the same is with ideas. And so, I get quite addicted to that process. And, that light bulb moment comes in, or you set a new goal, or you've got an idea for maybe a spin-off business or a project or a series of paintings. So we're sitting there in this, again, I'm not a big drinker or anything like that, but again, 2020, all bets are off. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. There's a lot of stuff that I said I don't do, and 2020 came around. I'm like, screw it, I'm doing it. Right. But we're sitting there in this beautiful little cocktail bar in Queenstown, and I get another idea for my next tutorial, and I was like, garçon, paper, paper, pen. And he comes over and gives you a little. I didn't do that. I don't click and I don't whistle at people.
Nobody should do
but I just said, sorry, mate, can I have a pen and paper? And he came around the table and he said, yeah, here you go. And Rachel's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm right. I've got it. I've got the idea for the next tutorial. And it just kind of came to me. I think you've got to execute on these things. But again, can't switch off.
No, you do. And I think you're right. When you have a brilliant idea, sometimes you just got to get it written down, and you actually feel like that instant relief the minute that you've got it down. You don't have to then keep going with it. It's knowing that, okay, you've got it, but actually subconsciously your brain's working on it. That's often what I find. That when I come to it after, I'm like, wow, that's actually developed more than I thought. Well, that's cool that you're similar to me, and I'm not the only weirdo that overdoes it in my brain.
So you know what? Because I've been interviewing artists for a while, and I find that a lot of the artists that are out there today that are doing this full time, and a lot of creative people that have got their own businesses, like yourself and your mom, with what you do with the brush. Most people, I'm finding this notion of the flaky artist. And I know I've got my flaky moments. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm always late. I don't know what the deal is, but in terms of trying to organize myself and organize my time, like I'm sitting here at my desk, I've got weekly planners with stuff written down. I've got notebooks full of, all of this stuff. I try to structure it the best I can. And I find that's so true for so many people. I've just interviewed a guy this is the next podcast after the next to come out, Daniel Bilmez. Who's a LA-based artist, phenomenal portrait painter. But as we were talking about how we structure, our time, he's like, yeah, I'm that guy too. I'm that crazy guy too. So I think you'll find a lot of people are in the same boat.
Yeah. It's hard, that balance. That was another question that I had for you was, how did you and then Rachel? I presume then before you met Rachel, you'd taken the leap to go professional, but. Was Rachel then doing her own thing before she met you? And then how did you as a household decide we can afford it? Because I've got to tell you, Andrew, we get so many people who are worried about that leap. They know they can't financially quite make it. So what do you say about that?
Wow. I mean, so that's a huge one. Rachel, just to answer the first part, Rachel had, and she was kind of, because we were young when we met, we're in our 20s and I think no one really has it figured out in their 20s, and some people even in their 30s and into their 40s, they don't have it really figured out. Life's a tough thing to try to figure out anyway. And so she had a background in fashion and fashion design. She got her diploma of fashion, from Massey University in Wellington, New Zealand, and she decided she had a gutful of New Zealand and she just wanted new opportunities and a new life. So she moved to Sydney. And then just on a whim, after living there for a couple of years or however long, she just decided with a friend she would move over to Perth. And that's when I met her. And when I met her, it was in that moment that I completely ruined her life. She got a life sentence with me. I figure, you find somebody like that, you put a ring on it as soon as you can, and just don't let go. I know I'm punching above my weight. I know I am. But the thing is that we did have that chat. She was working, part time, and it was difficult. The fashion industry was something that was really difficult to break into. And it wasn't something that, as she sort of explored her options there of making, designing clothes and selling, she was like, actually, the bit that I love is just spending time, cup of tea with my dog, sewing a dress on my own time without the pressure of having to sell it, without turning it into a business. And then she'd go work part-time at a fashion retailer, and that was her job. And she got to see people and talk to people and help ladies try on the clothes, and she got that interaction, and she was happy, and that was fine. And meanwhile, I was continuing to do my thing with my art, and for the longest time as well, for a while there, a few years anyway, we were very clear about that distinction. We're not going to work together. We're going to live together. We're going to be married. We're not going to work together. And I think we were missing out on so much. And then when we finally made that decision, I think it was initially, out of necessity, because there weren't really any jobs going that she was either interested in or felt that she could do. And, some part-time work, but there's only so many years you could spend working in a cafe or a bar. And she wasn't about to, go and start her fashion business, because that's just not who she was. She just wanted to continue to make her things in her own time. And by the way, I will say this about Rachel is, insanely talented. Like, she will wear out in this, in public, the things that she's made. She's got people coming up to her going, where did you get that jacket? Where did you get that dress? Oh my gosh, I love it. And she's like, oh, I made it. What? Where do you sell it? Like, kind of thing. And she's had that happen a few times. And it's like, wow, that's a validation that somebody needs. But she just does not want to turn that into a business. And I think now, she's a natural carer. She's a very nurturing person. And she loves getting a win. And when she sees the results coming in off of, so she's been, for instance, like now, like she's operating as my agent in the background. She's been selling massive paintings herself, just doing it herself without any art gallery or anything, just talking to people. She's come with me on artists in residencies when we do that. And she was helping me run classes and workshops, and when we found that, it was just the best thing ever. But, I think in terms of people, so the second part of your question, in terms of having, people take that plunge, it is a plunge and it is a leap of faith. And I have said things in the past on my own podcast and my own, social media and even YouTube videos. I was very new agey, and I was very, just go for it, just do it, Nike slogan, just do it, man, But now I'm going to revise what I said before. I think it's important in this day and age to build some sort of level of stability. If you're going to jump out there and take a business on and take the bull by the horns, you do it. And there's so many opportunities, even still, as an artist, that you can take advantage of, and so much access that you have to a marketplace that didn't exist before. But it's vitally important that you don't. It's like, my dad used, when he was training me, he would always teach me and coach me in terms of analogies, right? He'd use metaphors and analogies. And one of those was, if you've got a horse track and you've got horses running on that track, let's say you've got two horses. Horse A is your dream art career, and horse B is the job that you've got. If horse A is lagging behind horse B and it hasn't quite caught up in terms of income, don't shoot horse B just yet. We shouldn't say shoot the horse. Don't stop the race. All right. Yeah. I'm into animal rights, folks. Don't get me wrong. But you know what I mean. It's you've got to make sure that you can actually see the lily pad in front of you before you jump. And yes, sometimes things happen, opportunities happen, things come up. You do need to take a leap of faith, so to speak. But I think it's important to not just run and jump into it, because I have seen people that have maybe come into a bit of money, had an opportunity, and then wasted maybe a couple of years trying to make it as an artist, only to end up back at a job and go, well, that didn't work. Now, that can be really demoralizing for a lot of people. But I think what's better is keep that job going and work your butt off in the background, nights, weekends, early morning. Like, I know a builder in Queenstown. He's a buddy of mine. He gets up at 5 a.m. and paints before he has to go to the work site. Then he works a physical job all day. And then he's with the kids in the evening. Yeah. And like, people are telling me like, oh, Andrew, I just don't have time. Bollocks. You got time. You make the time. How much TV do you watch? Did you catch the latest show? Oh, did you? Well, you could have been painting. You could have been building a business. You could have been doing anything. You know, what'd you do on your lunch break? Did you sit there and eat your lunch? You could have been responding to your social media, answering emails, doing all sorts of things. You make time for exactly what's important to you. And if it's really important to you, you'll find a way. You will find a way. So that's my recommendation is hustle as hard as you can. Build yourself up in the background and then make that leap. And you can absolutely do it.
You've answered so many of my questions within that the answer. But one of the things, Mum and I, it drives us nuts when people say, you guys are lucky. Because you just think, no, you don't see the behind the scenes. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to put across on this whole episode that I'll bring out. Because the first thing that somebody will put on social media is, oh, amazing, you've got Andrew the legend. And that's obviously, that's like happy days. No, I agree with it entirely. But I think at the same time, they will then look at that, and somebody who's not met you before will look at it and go, oh, he's just got talent. I don't know how he's done it, but he was born with it. And you're thinking, no, you haven't seen the hours behind. Mum and I call them brush miles. But also the fact that Rachel's committed 100. I mean, first off, I've got to say, everybody needs a Rachel. If she wants to move to Yorkshire, she's hired.
Yeah. Can't have her. Sorry.
No, I thought you'd say that. But I think the thing is that people have to see this, the real side of this. That is, you are slogging away, working 9 to 5, if not more. Because that was my next question was: are you a morning guy? Are you an evening guy? What gets you up in the morning, and how do you start painting?
Oh, well, again, sorry, you did mention something there, so let me address that first before getting into kind of routine and schedule, and that's this notion of being lucky, and that's such an interesting one because I do get that as well. It's are you lucky? Okay, I'm blessed. I will give you that. Like a lot of the stuff that I have in my life, I know I didn't necessarily work for, and I know that just happened. And to me, it's grace. It just happened that way. And I'm so grateful for that. But the thing is that when you have, and for lack of a better word, let me go ahead and call it a gift, all right? I'm sorry how, up myself that sounds. But let's say, we just, for argument's sake, let's just say I was given a gift. When you're given something, I'd consider it a gift that I was given the parents I was given. That I was given the father that I was given. I didn't ask for that. It just happened. Now here I have, to me, a living legend, one of the best artists I've ever met, one of the most talented guys I've ever known, one of the most intelligent people I've ever known, and somebody just with an insane amount of talent, but somebody who never dropped the ball and worked his butt off for decades to get where he is. And when I watched that, I saw that as an example, being a young man, and I just realized, very early on, even as a child, I'm going to do that one day. I'm going to be an artist too. My dad can do it. I want to do it. And my dad, he was, he's an amazing guy. We talk pretty regularly still, and he was saying to me, even as a kid, I remember the conversations. You can absolutely do this, but it's going to take everything you've got. I'm like, fantastic, and we had I remember he was talking to me just about formulating this as a business. I had mathematical formulas on the pinup board where he said, Andrew, this many hours a week by this dollar hourly rate over 1 year equals this. Do you think you can do that? Yes. Okay, let's break this down in terms of paintings. Can you do that? Okay, fantastic. So how many hours are you going to need to work? And it's interesting, I'm all over the map, Simi, but I think the thing is, the harder I work, the luckier I get. It's like now with building an online business, people are like, oh, isn't it great having passive income? Passive income is a myth. It doesn't exist. You ain't ever going to get passive income. The harder I work, the more passive my income is. It all takes effort. It all takes work. And, there are some things that you're given, like a roll of the dice to be born in the United Kingdom, or for me, the United States of America, and get to live in a beautiful country like New Zealand. Like, I won lotto getting to live in a place like this, man.
Right.
But I also look for opportunities that no one sees. I got local people here in this town going, what are you doing in Lawrence? You could be, why aren't you over in Queenstown? Why aren't you over in Wellington City? Why aren't you up in Auckland, where the going's really good? What are you doing down here in Lawrence? I said, have you seen the building that I got down here? This would be millions of dollars in any one of those places you mentioned. You see, I can own a little bit of land and grow my own food. I got a little house with a tiny little mortgage. I get to do exactly as I please. That also comes down to working hard, but looking for the opportunities as well. You never take your sights off the goal and off what you're doing. And I think this idea of luck, it's something that really, I guess, if I'm completely honest about it, there are some things that I guess you could consider lucky breaks, but I think you do create a lot of those opportunities, and a lot of those opportunities, you have to act on and execute on. And again, I've met also a lot of talented people out there that never really acted on much, and they just ended up insanely talented working a job.
I agree with you, hands down. I mean, honestly, it happens to us, and it happens to me as well, because I'm frontline a bit more travel-wise than my mum. And people, will say, oh, Rosemary's, how long's she been going? Oh, that many years, really? I never knew, and she's so lucky to live in the house that she's in. Yeah. What people don't know is that I was born in a council house, which in England is stack by stack by stack. It's something the council helps subsidise you to live in. And I'll never forget, until I was 2, I lived there, and my mum and dad used to take the doors off in the winter. They would burn the firewood, and then in the spring and the summer, my dad would replace them. And that was our firewood. And, people don't know that side of it. When they now see Carhead Hall, too right my mum wants to live where she works, and too right she's done it. But it didn't come overnight, even though they found us overnight, But I think I think it's only when you start to see, like I'd said to you that my mum's growing her own food and things. It's not necessarily a fact that my mum doesn't want to go out, although she is more, obviously at the minute, more indoors than normal. But it is the self-sufficient way. It's the fact that my nan did have a greenhouse, and my mum wanted to recreate that, and she wants. Mum loves nothing more than putting out all the food at the front of the workshop and saying to everybody at work, "I've got an overflow of carrots, guys, go for it," And she's making jars of pickles.
Oh, beautiful!
And she loves it, but that's it's the side to things that now that you've got to be so careful that people don't think that we've got everything, because we haven't. But what we do have, we've worked damned hard for. And I want people to know that about painters, because honestly, I see it in my generation, where people my age and a bit lower, a bit younger, will look at people like yourselves and the Lip Kings and the Schmids and all these people that we put up there, and they'll go, oh, I want that. And they'll think, Andrew's got a huge following on YouTube. I can do that. I can follow that. And actually you think, well, you've got to slog it, and actually you're not that interesting. Sorry to tell you, break the spell here, but just because your mum thinks you're interesting doesn't mean you are. And at that point,
don't listen to her, folks. Don't listen to her.
I'm sorry, but you've got to find your own way. That's my point. This copycats will never win.
You do.
But also
no. I agree 100%.
But you do make your own luck. Mum and I's relationships with people over time is because we've developed those. That's not luck. Luck might be that we're in the same place at the same time. That's lucky. But lots of people didn't speak to them, and they were able to.
Yeah.
So
it's and I can relate to that as well, because people see where you are, and then they make a lot of assumptions, so they'll see maybe, or they'll find out how much you charge for a painting, for instance, and then they'll make a lot of assumptions there. And I was around, like I was painting full time professionally for over a decade before anyone watched one of my YouTube videos, before anybody knew who I was. At the time when I launched my YouTube channel, what people don't actually realize, they might now if they've listened to some of my stuff, is I was broke and we lived in the studio. I was living in a factory unit, illegal to be living there. We at least had a flushing toilet and a shower because it was, a factory unit, and I guess the workmen at the time could have, used the facilities and stuff. It was dusty, it was hot, it was cold in the winter. Next door to us, we had somebody that was making breakfast cereal, had a little boutique breakfast cereal business. Across the way, within this complex, there was an industrial laundry and then an engineer fabrication plant. Every morning, the people working the laundry for all the accommodation in the town were coming in and out of that place, driving their cars in through the factory unit. So then you'd smell the car fumes and the carbon monoxide. And then you would hear at 6 a.m. the clang, clang, clang. Edgar down there banging on sheet metal, and because he's out there getting an early start, or he'll start up his big truck, out the front of his unit. And people don't know that. And I started a YouTube channel from inside that factory unit. I came out, I was walking out one morning because we had dogs that were in there as well, and my old border collie, Jessie, but I remember letting her outside one morning to just go to the loo, and I was standing out the front of my unit with my gym jams on, holding a cup of coffee, and the lady just across making the breakfast cereal was just coming into work, and she's like, "Oh, you're here early." And then she looked at me, she's like, "Oh, you never left."
You live here.
I said,
"Yeah,
Julie, I live here." She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I'm like, "No, it's quite nice. You should actually see it inside. We did it up. We took pride in it. We had plants and we had some furniture and stuff, and we made do."
Yeah.
But I'll never forget, there was a period of months there where it was scary, where we weren't sure how we're going to make rent. And people don't know that. Art is one of those things that is one of the most volatile industries that I know of. Where you can completely lose your business based on something that's totally outside of your control, like a change in legislation, meaning that people could no longer buy paintings with their retirement funds. That happened overnight. Half my business gone, half gone. Or let's say China stops buying iron ore. So now all of the executives in Western Australia that are your collectors start getting laid off. And it's like, "Oh, sorry, you got to keep the deposit. We can't go through with the commission or anything. Because we can't afford it," or whatever. Just overnight stuff happens that's outside of our control. And those lessons that I learned, going through this business were, is kind of what made me what I am today. Would I go through it again? Absolutely. Yeah, it would suck. But, I'm glad I learned that. Hopefully I don't have to go. Hopefully I'm going to go through something else now. So I learned that lesson. But, the one thing that taught me is, be really ruthless about executing on your ideas and setting goals. Execute on those plans, diversify, work your butt off, and never, ever, ever take anything for granted. Any success, anything, say thank you, and get on with it. Right. Keep going. Do not drop the ball.
So on that note, though, I want to ask you, sorry, just real quick on that one before because I know what we're both like. We're both... so just tell us a little bit about how you organise your day and your week, your months, because that's something that fascinates me, and I know so many people will want to know, how is Andrew doing it? Because you and your wife are wearing lots of hats, but at the end of the day, stuff's got to get done. So how are you doing it?
It does. It does. Well, okay, so now as well, to be fair, it's not just my wife and I anymore. We hired an editor who's been working for us full time. And I'll get to the routine part and how I organize my time, but there are more hands on deck.
Right.
We've just hired a fourth team member. So that's now within our little company, Tischler Enterprises, Proprietary Limited. Basically, we've got 4 full-time employees, which is cool. And now, how lucky are we? But again, we end up we make something happen. We execute on a plan. It works. What do? I reinvest in the business. Keep doing that. I guess a bit like your mom buying stock. You reinvest in that business constantly. So there's a lot of different hats that I have to wear still, even though I've been able to delegate to other people. So I did a bit of I received some personal one-on-one coaching with a guy named Dr. John DeMartini, read some of his books, went to some of his seminars. Don't agree with everything he has to say, but interesting guy. But there is some takeaways that I got from him. And one of those was, if there's something that you can do and your time's worth X amount, or you value yourself at X amount, and there's something that you're doing currently which is eating up a significant chunk of that time, and it could be done by somebody who charges Y amount, just below X or whatever, or slightly less than whatever you're worth, delegate that task immediately. Don't even think about it. Delegate it immediately to that person and free yourself up to focus on high priority tasks. So now within my day and within my time, I focus on high priority tasks. That's the way it kind of has to be. There are still some things in this business I'm the only one that can do it,
right.
And that's just the way it is. I can't delegate painting.
Yeah.
I can't delegate the writing of a treatment or a script or coming up with an idea for a video. That's all on me.
Right.
I've got people that will execute on ideas, but in terms of coming up with the stuff, I can't say, hey, Liam, hey, Zoe, pick up that brush. Can you just add a little bit of cobalt teal to that breaking wave for me? Yeah, sweet. That's it. No, left. Yeah, perfect. There you go. I can't do that. You know what I mean? That's... Sometimes, don't get me wrong, I'd love to, but so I have them doing things as well. The other part of that is hire people who are better at what they do than what you could do. I can edit video just fine. Am I better than them at it? Heck no.
No.
Hire somebody that can do it much better than you, and you find that balance. So that said, in terms of my day, my routine and my life has gone through many different changes. I'm a work in progress, and anytime I'll state an idea or say that I'm all about this, that's likely to change. And I think as human beings, we pigeonhole ourselves, and we allow ourselves to get pigeonholed without being able to adapt and grow and change. And I think if one thing this year has taught us is that we need to be able to adapt, grow, and change and move. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. You're just not. You're going to be overcome and anxiety and all sorts of things. So I've had to kind of bob and weave like a boxer almost, rolling with the punches. Yeah. Now, I used to be fanatic about waking up at 4 a.m. and get down to the studio and be painting by 5:30 a.m. I realized after a while that I was getting so burned out and exhausted doing that, that I quickly, I made myself quite sick doing it. I was also a fanatic, and still am fanatic about exercise. So I was also starting to train twice a day. So after a couple of hours in the studio, the gym wasn't even open at that early. So then I would go to the gym for a little while and do my cardio session, then work all day, and then go to the gym again, and then go home and collapse and then get up and do it all again. It was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. In terms of social time, what social time? I had none. I didn't have any scheduled at all. And so now it's different. My philosophy's changed. What is paramount to me, priority for me, and again, I'll just, absolutely my priority is my relationship with God, my creator. So that's number one, first and foremost. So we'll put that to one side. My priority is health and well-being, mental well-being. And I think that it's important to kind of treat my body with respect, really think about how I'm living my life, pay very close attention to what's going into my body, and limit things, moderate things, everything in moderation, so they say. But also, like, exercising as well. So getting enough sleep, that's so important. So now I'll go to sleep at a reasonable hour. I don't stay up too late. Sometimes maybe if I'm stressed or something's going on, I might not get to bed or whatever, but I'm waking up at what time my body wakes up. And I'm just allowing my body to rest, recover, and heal. Mm-hmm. What I found through getting more sleep is I'm actually much more productive. Right. I'm nicer to be around. And don't get me wrong, I'm a grumpy guy at the best of times. You might not know that, but I'm quite temperamental. I'm gonna have my grumpy moments because I'm just chewing on these ideas. I'm chewing on the painting. I'm just thinking about things, and I'm always at that coalface of like an idea is just I'm like chipping away at that rock wall, just trying to make it work, and I'm fighting with it constantly, and that's why I'm like grinding my teeth, just going, I just want it to work, and so that, of course, comes through in my personal mood because it's like, not now, I'm busy, and so. But I find, though, generally, if I haven't slept, that's when I'm going to bite your head off. But I'm so much nicer to be around when I've had a bit of sleep. So that really helps. And I think my wife appreciates that. But the exercise as well. Like, so I train 6 days a week, and I have a day off. But I'm at the gym for an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours a day. And that's my reset time. I gotta have that. And if we go into lockdown again here in New Zealand, I got a gym at home, then I can use that. Mm-hmm. So and you don't need much to be able to train and exercise. Just get your body moving. For me, that's huge. So generally a day is wake up whenever I get up. I wasn't a big coffee drinker for a while there. I'd quit for a couple of years. I started drinking coffee again because whatever, I love it. And I will have a cup of coffee with my wife in the morning. We'll spend some time together. I'll play with the dogs, and then get ready, come into the studio, roll in here. And normally I'm here anywhere between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I'll just start writing. Or doing some of the business side of things. On a Tuesday, I've got my guys here, and they're working full time down where they are in Dunedin, the nearest town. And on a Tuesday, they'll come up. We'll do a live stream on Patreon. We have a 1.5 to 2 hour live stream painting session on Patreon every week, where people can tune in, ask questions live, and I get to spend time, with the people that follow me there. Mm-hmm. And I need their help to kind of make all that work. And then after that, they go home. I keep painting, and I get to put in a full week that way. And 5:30, 6 o'clock rolls around. I meet my buddies down at the gym. We go train. Yeah. It's pretty good. I mean, it's working. Could I be getting more done? Could I be doing more hours? Absolutely, I could be. But I feel now at this point that it comes down to the quality of the time that you're putting in. I got to stay sharp. My brain has got to be working. I've been engaged in so much abortive work in my time, or just spending too long on a painting when I could just get in there and get it done. I need everything to be thought out, considered. I can't do that on a half empty tank. Mm-hmm. I got to fill that up. And so I think balance is an interesting thing for people. I mean, you hear this word so much. You got to balance it. Balance this, balance that. And there's so much woo-woo attached to it. I think balance is a very individual thing. You got to find your balance. Right. My father, when I was very young, he told me, he said, Andrew, I got time in my life for 2 things, my family, my art. I said, what about your friends? Dad didn't have any friends. That's the thing. I mean, Dad had friends, but he didn't. Dad was never hanging out with his buddies. I never knew that. People would come over to the house to sit with my father and talk over a cup of tea, and then he'd go back to work. Mm-hmm. But I never remember my dad ever really going out of his way to socialize for anything. And it was always that list. 2 things were on it. My art, my family, my art. That's it. Done.
That sounds like my mum.
Yeah.
She's
See, if you're smart, you can well, it doesn't really work if you're working with your friends. You don't stay friends very long, I found. Yeah. But you can absolutely, like, for me, I've got a lot of friends through church, but I also, like, through training. I train with my church buddies. I'm training them, and so I get to see them, multiple times a week. And it's like we go and have gym time, and it's like we've been socializing, but we're training hard, and then we go back to work.
I totally agree when you say finding your own balance, because what works for somebody doesn't work for somebody else. And when people say, like, I get this quite a lot, people say to me, you overwork, or you're a workaholic, and I just think, you can't categorize that for me. Don't tell me what I am. I'm happy. So, I've got little Max, I have a lovely partner, I have a beautiful mum that I get to work with every day. We have a great team. And actually, what the balance for me is knowing I'm achieving, but also the fact that I can have a really large glass of red wine on a Friday night. And even more of a balance is if I don't have one on a Tuesday, then I really feel like I'm on top of it. But if I want to work till 8 or 9 o'clock at night some nights, that's because I've got more to do that week. But I also have the freedom to say, guys, I'm not going to be in until 12 o'clock or 10 o'clock the next day, and that's I don't really do that, but I have that freedom if I wanted to. But the balance thing and the sleep thing, I've always suffered with really bad insomnia where I'm up till 3 or 4 in the morning regularly. So I get that, the whole eating healthy and then, trying to get your rhythm into play. And I'm definitely, touch wood, the last year I've done better at that, but it doesn't help the amount of travel. When you travel a ton, your body clock's totally off all the time. So somebody who can't sleep, forget it, So leading me on, I'm going to ask you some questions.
Absolutely.
I'm having so much fun, by the way. I absolutely love listening.
Yeah, me too. It's great.
I know that I often can't even speak, but I don't want to speak because I just want to listen, and I'm just sitting nodding, but I want you to know I'm absolutely loving this. So I'm going to hit you with a couple quick fire questions that Rosemary had specifically asked me to ask you.
Awesome.
And I want to apologise to everybody. Andrew knows this already, that my mum was going to come actually as a surprise guest this evening, but unfortunately in our area, specifically in Yorkshire, we're not allowed even family to visit the home, so we couldn't risk it. But one of the things she wanted to ask you was, why then did you make the move to New Zealand in the end?
Well, let me put it this way. Once you have come to a place like New Zealand and you see and experience this country, it has an impact on you that is just profound. And I'm sure there are lots of places that do that for lots of folks. But for me personally, I grew up in Texas. I left when I was 6 years old, the family and the situation. My dad was itching for an excuse to get out of the United States. He saw kind of what was happening there culturally, in terms of violence, drugs, the culture. He just didn't jive with him. My parents separated. My dad, when he remarried, he married a zoo veterinarian. And so it was her work that actually took us all over the place. And so she got a job. She was working at the Dallas Zoo at the time. And we ended up getting a job at the Wellington Zoo. And Dad was just itching for an excuse to get out of the U.S. So we moved to New Zealand and lived in a place, Wellington, but I lived in a place called Haitaitai and just on the side of Mount Vic. So people might recognize that place. So to give you an example, I played in the forest. There's a scene in Lord of the Rings in the first movie where he's with Samwise and Pippin and the other guy, I forget, Merry. And Frodo suddenly realizes something's not right. And he's like, get off the road, get off the road. And then the Ringwraith shows up and he puts his hands on that root and he's looking around for the little hobbits and they're hiding from the Ringwraith. That forest and that scene, that's where I played. I recognized it as soon as I saw it on the big screen. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's Mount Vic. So it was a really magical place. And I remember I used to play in a park that was kind of on Mount Victoria, and it was private access to this park, but public park, but you had to cut through our garden to get there. And most of the time I had this place to myself, but I'd look out over this amazing landscape and just being a child, at that time, early 90s, and just experiencing that, it's never left me. So New Zealand left an impression on me. So when I was 10 years old and we moved to Perth, I was pretty bummed out about it. It was pretty sad. But Australia had its own unique, amazing things going on, of course. And I learned to love it over a period of years. I was there in Australia for 20 to 24 years. The time's fuzzy for me now, but a long time, in Australia. When I met Rachel, who is from Wellington, New Zealand, and that was the first thing. As soon as I found out she's from Wellington, I straight away, head over heels. I'm like, wow, you're my dream girl. You're from Wellington. So we were just starting to look around places in Australia to live. And it seemed to become clear. We were just kind of looking for places. Oh, I love this place because it reminds me of New Zealand. Oh, I love that place because that forest there reminds me of New Zealand. We did an art tour in 2016 where I took a bunch of my students from my live workshops in Australia. We had a plein air painting trip across the South Island. We wrapped up the tour. We're walking down the marina in Queenstown. And I turned to Rachel and I said to her, if you could live here, why wouldn't you? And then it just suddenly it dropped. And we're just like, hang on a second. We can. Let's do it. And we started making the arrangements to move shortly thereafter. And it was one of the best decisions we could have made. So we don't live in Queenstown, of course, but we live a couple hours out of Queenstown in the South Island. Amazing landscape, beautiful little community here. And It's just everything's kind of fallen into place. So we ended up in Lawrence quite randomly, but we're on the main highway between Dunedin and Queenstown. I just love it here. It's an amazing spot.
Well, I see, obviously, on your social media, you post the most beautiful landscapes. And I mean, I'm huge about Yorkshire. I brag on Yorkshire all the time because I think it's just, but I think the more you travel, the more you learn to love where you are. And if you're not prepared to love where you are, move to where you want to live, But I got to tell you, the landscape that you're at is just absolutely breathtaking. So that actually, you've already kind of answered it again, but that was one of Mum's questions was, do you do live workshops, if that's what you're calling them, person to person, as well as obviously online?
No, not anymore. I've kind of turned away from teaching live workshops, and I did this because when I realized I could do a video and get tens of thousands of views and help people in a bite-sized chunk of information and kind of distill everything through the process of editing, condense the painting process down, I thought, I'm being much more effective doing this, reaching more people and expanding that way than I am teaching live workshops. But there is something that I do miss about teaching the workshop. I mean, I do miss that person-to-person interaction. But now I'm very grateful that I made the move to go online, because now it's becoming increasingly difficult to gather in groups of any number. You name it, it's going to be very difficult to do that, unless we social distance, which is the most anti-social thing I can think of, but social distancing. So I think that, for me now, the future is pretty clear in terms of the direction I need to take, my business. And I mean, never say never. I would happily do demos, workshops, if the opportunity came up. But I was even considering. There were all sorts of conventions and expos and things happening in the United States. 2020 was our year, man. We were going to get on the planes, start traveling, and I was going to be hitting up a lot of those expos and conventions. First as a visitor, and then in subsequent years, becoming a regular, either contributor or whatever I could do to help out. I just wanted to be amongst it, what was happening over there. And even in the UK, coming to see you guys was definitely on my bucket list, to go and paint those magnificent grounds and see the landscape there. My goodness, how amazing would that be? But yeah, we'll see what the future holds.
Very cryptic, Andrew, very cryptic.
Yeah, well.
No, I like it. It's true though. It's there's so many things when we can all get back together. So many events around the world. There's an amazing plein air event in Maui that I've been itching to go to for years.
Oh wow! Yeah.
There's a couple that run in Bermuda. There's an amazing international watercolor event in China every year that I'm like dying to go to, and there's a big watercolor event in Fabriano in Italy, and there's all these like places that I haven't even touched the surface yet that I'm desperate to go to, but c'est la vie. So Rosemary's other question, because she's very sentimental like this, and she knows, she wants me to make it clear to you, we know how admired you are and followed you are, and sometimes I know when you're in the thick of that, you forget yourself, but I'm going to make it clear to you that you are a big deal. And Rosemary has asked.
Oh, thanks.
Well, it's true, and she wanted to know what advice would you give to younger artists that are just about to get started on this journey, that when they see this video and they go, wow, look what Andrew's done, but how can you advise them and give them tips along the way?
Oh, there are so many things.
I know.
First of all, I just want to address that thing about being a big deal. I only ever wanted to be a big deal to maybe one other person. But in terms of being a big deal, the only thing I ever wanted to do was really help somebody or impact somebody, make their day a little bit better, reach out to them in a particular way. I've been very fortunate, and again, I've worked so hard at my craft, but I've had these moments in exhibitions, just from my painting standpoint, where I had this, I'll never forget this moment. There was an exhibition, it was my 10-year anniversary exhibition that was held in 2012. All All right. So in 2012, I had already been doing it professionally 10 years. So we had it in the same place where I had my first exhibition in 2002. Now, I went full-time properly at 21, so that would have been '04. But that first exhibition, that's really what I think kicked it off for me. So we had it the same thing. And so in 2012, I have this exhibition. Half of the work was borrowed back. The other half was all brand new work. And I'll never forget this moment. This guy bought a painting, bought a little seascape painting. And he said, look, I just bought your painting. I just want you to tell me about it. Tell me about what inspired you, what's behind it, what's in it for you, kind of thing. Tell me about this painting. And so I started talking to him about the way I felt about the place. I'm like, this is down in Yallingup. This is my favorite time of day. It's like that silver light that you get on a winter's day, the broken clouds shining off the water. And I'm facing the painting, pointing to all these little things, talking about the colors and the balance of tones and this and that. And then I turn around and say, you get it? And tears pouring down his face. And I just suddenly just got choked up. And I was like, wow, that I could make a difference to him, that he loved this painting so much, he would part with his hard-earned cash. He wasn't a particularly well-to-do guy from memory, but he just loved this painting and wanted to look at it every day. And it just made an impact on him. It got him right there. And I thought, wow, I did that. I was able to have that effect on him. Suddenly there was something about that. It doesn't mean I do it every time, but that became something that was the goal, is to make an emotional connection with someone. The first person I had to make that emotional connection with was myself. I had to go, what do I really want to see? What do I really want to say? What do I really want to feel through this painting? What place could I transport myself to, and thus take my viewer along for the trip? Could I leave them with something? And it caused me to want to pour everything I had into painting to bring that situation, that scenario, that thing to life, to just bring this situation out so you could walk through that landscape with me and we could experience that. And I said in the past, art's about relationships. The first relationship is a relationship the artist has with their work. At that point, though, they really have to turn loose. And now a new relationship takes over, and that's a relationship between the viewer and the painting. And if I've done my job correctly, then that will be a relationship that will last between that viewer and that painting. It will have a lasting impact. Because I was impacted by paintings that I had seen. Ivan Ivanovich Shishkin changed my frickin' life. When I looked upon his original paintings, and I was about 24 years old, I saw some of his, I was already painting. I was already doing it a couple of years into the game. And then I saw him and I thought, I am mucking around. What is that? Wow. And I went back to that exhibition so many times and I kept looking at those paintings just going, this Russian 19th century master, never seen anything like it. And I realized that's really what I wanted to do. And, advice for young people, I think, is being ruthless about who you are and what you really want to do. Because I think nowadays we get trapped in this game between our heads and our hearts. We know truly in our heart what we would love to do, but we get in the way with our mental chatter about what we think other people want to see. And that can't be about it. You'll end up forming your own audience by creating things authentically. If you want to paint teddy bears and puppy dogs, and that's you, but you think you're not going to be accepted by the art establishment, who gives a rat? Go and paint teddy bears and puppy dogs. Go and do you. And you're going to end up carving out a niche of the world where people are just like, have you seen that guy's or that gal's teddy bear and puppy dog paintings? They're to die for. It's like, well, I don't know my thing, whatever. But you'll find people that is their thing. And you've got to do you. There are people right now out there that just cannot stand what I do. I know right now the paintings that I produce make my lecturers from the university that I went to, it makes them want to throw up their toenails. Like there's just no way that they'll ever accept me. And that I found difficult to just try and get my head around. Like, why not? I'm out there being a professional artist. I'm doing it. This is what my degree was about, right? They'll never accept me into that modern art establishment, that academic art world. That ain't my game. That's not my jam. I don't even pretend to understand it. I don't care. I just want to paint landscapes and portraits and do the best job I can. And now, equal to that in terms of what I'm passionate about, is showing other people how to do that. You see, I carried with me the mentality for the longest time that those that can't teach. So as soon as I went into teaching, out of necessity, mind you, because I lost my business several times, I've gone absolutely broke several times. That out of necessity, I taught, and I felt like a failure. But then what happened is people were getting so much out of the workshops, and I was like, oh, this is what it's about. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly I just got it. I get emails now from people from all over the world. My favorite, and I get this so many times, it's really interesting. They're not related in any way, but this same email. I haven't picked up the brushes for 35 years, and I just went and bought some Rosemary & Co. brushes, some oil paints. A little plug there for you. Do you like that? I've now gone out there, and I'm now painting again because I saw a video that you'd put together. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I live for that moment. I live for that. I love that. It's a validation that I feel like I never got, but therein, kind of for myself, I take it so seriously that I'm like, I can't let up. I can't drop the ball here. And so my advice for anybody young is, first, identify who you are and what you really want to do and go after it, and get prepared to hear this word a bunch. Though it's a little word, but we're so terrified of it. It's no. Hey, I got some work. Would you like to see my paintings? I want to show in this gallery. No. Hey, I want to submit my work to this competition. Can I hang out with you guys and can I show in this competition? No. You're going to hear that. The trick is that when I first had paintings under my arm, I was rejected from every single gallery I applied to. Every single one of them rejected me. You're not good enough. I've not always been able to paint. In the beginning, I sucked. And this is the other thing as well. Not enough people in the younger generation or up and coming now are prepared to suck.
Right.
You got to be prepared to suck. You're going to suck. Everyone sucks in the beginning. I don't care how talented you think that person is, they sucked. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they got better because they were like, I suck. This sucks. I don't want to suck. What does it take to get good? And they learned the strategies, and they put in the brush miles. They put in that time, and they ended up building a body of work, and they just leveraged one success to the next and kept climbing this. The other thing you got to realize, if you're up and coming and you want to make it, art is a long game. It's a long game. And somehow now in today's day and age, we've been conditioned to want things now. We don't want to wait for things. We don't want to work for things. For now some people think that they're entitled to a living, to an income, to a career, to a passion, to a vocation. You ain't entitled to anything. When I was doing this, I worked for everything. I worked my butt off. When the party was going on, sorry, I can't make it. When my buddies were hanging out at the pub, sorry, I can't make it. You got the right guy. You got the wrong decade. I'm working. I lost a lot of friends. Yeah. And people aren't prepared to go through that. Yeah. And I think so. Yeah, be ruthless about who you are. Be prepared to suck and put in the miles to get better. Do not let up at this. Put in the time. And the other thing that I think people aren't prepared for, and people don't like, is this word sacrifice. Mm-hmm. You've got to make sacrifices. You have to decide what's important to you and cut everything else out. I learned that lesson very early on when my father said, I got time in my life for two things: my family, which is you kids, and art. Mm-hmm. That's it. And I was like, dude, your life sucks. You got no friends, Dad. I had loads of friends as a kid. Loads of friends. But now as an adult, I my buddies laugh at me because, it's like, we'll see you at the gym or we'll see you at church. That's when I get to see them. Yeah. That's it. And because I'm not the pub guy. I'm not the coffee guy. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen.
Do you know, it's similar because when I was at law school, and one of the things our senior lecturer used to say to us is, be prepared to lose friends, not attend the christening, not be able to make the wedding and all the rest of it. And even though I didn't then go into law and I came into Rosemary & Co., I've made the same sacrifices. You've got to sacrifice. I think I want to now talk to you a little bit about brushes, because there's no way me doing my job with my hat on can have Andrew Tischler on this, on this program without obviously first thanking you, and one of the things I want to put straight out there, and you guys who are watching this, I want you to know that Andrew is not paid by us.
I'm not?
Well, sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
I think a lot of
I'm still waiting.
Right. But a lot of people are going to, question that. And when you stand there and you say, use Rosemary brushes, I know that we're going to sort out an affiliate thing with the new website, and all that will be hunky-dory. Like anybody can accrue that sort of thing. But I just want to say, obviously, from Mum and I, thank you so much, first of all. But I also want to ask some pretty nitty-gritty questions for you. So the first thing is the Tish Dagger. So that's a brush that we sell tons of, we make tons of, and they sell like hotcakes. But what was it about that you needed, and what couldn't you find, and why did you need that through us?
Yeah, the dagger is an interesting one because it's something that it kind of came about by accident. So I was looking for a brush that kind of suited my technique and the speed at which I wanted to work. And so I found something that was close, but not quite. And it was made by a company in Australia, and it was a dagger brush, but the angle was off and it was too fat, and they didn't last very long because it just had too much bristle, so paint would get caught in it. And then what happened is I bought a bunch of them, and I started cutting around on them with a pair of scissors to thin them out, and then the manufacturer stopped making them. So I still have a few of the older ones left, and I'm like, I just can't get this. Nobody makes a dagger, nobody makes a wedge, and it just suited my technique so much. And then when I started to see, and I started to get an inkling that of how closely, you guys as a company, how closely you work with artists, and I started seeing artists come out with their own brushes, I thought, hang on a second, maybe this is the answer to finding a dagger finally that would suit my technique. I could teach with it, but also I think it would just free me up and just unlock a part of the process that is just currently missing from my studio practice. And so that's when, the emails started and the communication back and forth and working on this design. When I was teaching workshops, I was saying to people, when you're painting with oils and you're using that bristle brush, what you're looking for in a clean brush, in a beautiful, pristine brush, I take very good care of my brushes, when you're working with the best brushes. And again, you guys didn't pay me. This is not a paid thing we're doing now. It's not an advertisement or anything like this. And I will just say a note of things. When I promote a product, it's because I use it, and it's because I want to share with people what I'm using. So this is what I use for my studio work, my commission stuff, what I'm teaching with. These are just simply my favorite brushes, and it just happens now that we're in touch, and it's working for everybody. So it's a win-win. I look for these types of relationships in business all the time, is those win-win relationships, and it's brilliant, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. But that's it. We're going back and forth, and we're coming up with this design. When you're looking for that brush, and I taught workshops, and I was telling people, it comes down to the flex. Sometimes less bristles actually carry more paint. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not necessarily about having this huge wad of bristles and fibers, and that was the trouble I was having with that existing dagger, is that I just wasn't getting those expressive brush marks. And so I started getting the idea, okay, well, look, maybe if we thinned it down, maybe if we just had a compact ferrule with just a nice blade on it, and then it was getting the ratio right on that dagger. So if we put two squares together, one square above another, and then take that top square and cut it down at 45 degrees, connecting one corner to the other. I remember drawing that picture for your mom and just saying, try this, send me those, and let's see. Because, sometimes the end of the dagger would come too close to the ferrule, so as the brush would wear down, you'd scrape that metal against the canvas and be like, oh, well, we don't want that. Yeah. We need to get it right, the right length, the right thickness, the right angle. And then I've had people, contact me, say, oh, I've got daggers, and then I'd see what they have done. They bought the cheapest bristle flat brushes they could find. They got a pair of scissors and they cut an angle on them. And I'm like, the bristles form a natural taper. Mm-hmm. When you cut them off across the hair, you now imagine that cross section of rather than it coming to a very fine point naturally the way a hair grows. Now you've actually just cut that across the thickest part, and now your brush is doing that. It's splaying open. Right. And now you've got no precision, no control, no nothing. So these things are specially formed, and as soon as that design was nailed, I'm telling you right now, this is my favorite. It's my favorite brush to use. And then she asked me, what are we going to call it? And I was
Right.
just like I was going through all sorts of things going, oh, we're going to call it the landscaper or the this or that. I was like tossing the ideas around with Rachel. And I was like, no, I got the cheesiest idea. This is the dumbest thing ever, but it's going to be great. We're going to call it the Tish. And I was crying, laughing, going, we're going to call it the Tish. The Tish. Like, it's ridiculous, but I love it. Because it's now become it's almost become a brush meme.
Yeah,
it's great.
I just want to say something about that whole cutting a brush, because it's obviously something that I get emails here and there, about people saying that they want to make their own brushes. And my usual response, the one that you're welcome to start sharing, is that you can cut a brush, but don't forget that the hair won't grow back. That is an email I had once from a lady that she couldn't understand that she cut the brush but the hairs weren't growing back on the brush, and trust me, that is a real email. So I just think
what a sweetheart. Are you serious? Oh, what a sweetheart.
I know, and I hope that she watches this and she realizes that it perhaps was never going to grow back. But people don't understand, I think, probably the years worth of work it takes to go back and forth, and the amount of work that Rosemary will send you out prototypes, you'll try them, but you can't try them for a day or a week. You've got to try them and wear them out, So I'm going to actually now just quickly play the video, if that's okay with you, and show a fancy video of these brushes spinning around. Okay.
Beautiful. Very cool.
Just even being able to put your signature on the end like that, little things like that are like huge goals for us. So and being able to put your signature on the actual handle, that revolutionized. I want you to know that totally revolutionized how we were then able to start branding things, and actually fully getting a pad printing machine, getting a guy to do it day in, day out, and Adrian, our pad printer, is absolutely brilliant. He actually wears 2 pairs of glasses when he's pad printing because of the precision that he wants to give to it. But he's, it's that sort of thing that I think is it makes brush making cool again.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Poor guy, though. I get this kind of vision in my head as you say that of him just stamping this brush going, if I see one more Tish. Sorry, dude.
To make it feel any better for you, you're not the only person that he sees in a week. So
I'm sure.
There's several people's names that I'm sure that he dreams about on an evening, but it's such a precise thing, But it's just in general, we get so many questions and so many people giving us wonderful feedback. But I did want to ask something here that we also get questions of, which is, what is the life expectancy of a brush? And that's something that I really want you to be totally honest with.
Yeah. So again, the life expectancy of a brush, it all comes down to 2 things. One, how you use it, in terms of what your painting technique is like, and then how you maintain it and clean it. I'm pretty particular, pretty finicky when it comes to cleanliness and organization here in the studio. Physically having my things in the right place, but then keeping my studio in such a way so that it's really as conducive to creativity as possible. So when I come into the studio, I have to be ready to roll. And one of the most important things about that, not only having a fresh palette, a clean palette to be able to get fresh color out, but having brushes that are ready to go. I don't want to get into the studio and say, well, now I'm going to spend an hour cleaning up just so I can get to the damn easel. I want to be ready to roll. And you're talking to me now in the studio. You can see my workstation right here. I've got my wheelie palette with the palette cam set up. And my brushes are all over there in a whole bunch of pots, hundreds of brushes over there. But it really comes down to cleaning as well. So when I'm painting, I don't have a very aggressive painting technique. I'll never push a brush. I'll always drag a brush. I'll sometimes roll the brush. I'll sometimes use it in a unique way to apply that paint. But I'm never going overboard and really abusing that hair, getting it to do something it wasn't designed to do. So it's really a process of dragging, drawing, and just gently manipulating that paint on that surface. I see some techniques of like where you've got, and I'll use cheap brushes for this. I don't use my good brushes. Let's say if I had to scrub a wash or a tonal layer into a canvas before I start painting, I'll use a chip brush, just a house painting brush for that. So that helps there, save them. But then when it comes to washing, I've got like a double wash process for the most part, but for if it's going to be any period of time between painting sessions, it's a triple wash. So that means like 3 jars of pure gum turpentine. And just the way, and it might sound so elementary, but just the way the brush actually hits the bottom of that glass vessel, whether it's a jar or a little ramekin. I use a lot of glass ramekins here in the studio. The height of your jar determines the life of your brush. Mm-hmm. That's so, I never thought that. If you imagine this, if you've got a really high, tall jar with a narrow opening, you can't get the brush down at an angle low enough to actually be able to engage with the bottom of that vessel so it appropriately splays apart those fibers to release the paint from inside the ferrule. Instead, you're coming down at it at a vertical angle, breaking off and snapping off those bristle fibers. So I use salsa jars. Now, if you imagine like the CC's or Old El Paso salsa, wherever, it's a short, fat jar with a wide opening, big enough you can fit a big old corn chip into that jar of salsa. That's perfect for painting. You could almost open that jar, scoop all of the salsa out, get rid of it or whatever. It's about the jar. You got to have that jar, right? Maybe don't waste the food. Eat the salsa. Salsa's good. But those are my favorite jars if I'm going to use a jar, because I can now get the brush down at such an angle that when it engages that glass bottom, it then splays apart and releases that. So you got the first jar there of pure gum turpentine. You got the next jar. So after you wiped it off on a paper towel, first wipe all the paint off, then do your first wash, dry it off, wipe it off thoroughly, do your second wash, do that, and then on the third jar, do a third and final wash. Then lay your brushes down flat, not vertical, flat, because what happens when you store them vertically, once they've just been washed, all those particles of pigment, if there's anything left, start drawing and accumulating down into the ferrule, forcing those fibers apart. So lay them down flat, squeeze don't pull on the bristles, but squeeze that turpentine out of that bristle onto a clean kitchen towel or paper towel, and then store it flat. And I found that using pure gum turpentine, whilst it might leave a sticky residue if it's left for a few days, if you just dip it in fresh pure gum turpentine, it's much better at preserving a brush than using something like a white spirit or a mineral turpentine. And not to mention the health consequences of using petroleum distillates or byproducts of that process. Hydrocarbons, they can be really damaging on our health, especially in confined spaces, but I've not had any issues whatsoever with pure gum turpentine, which is more or less a natural product. So if it's going to be a while between painting sessions, I'll use a natural product, which is a combination of oils and waxes as a brush conditioner. The particular one I use is a Art Spectrum, and it says brush and hand cleaner. So it shows you that it's non-toxic as a hand cleaner, but it's all natural oils and waxes in there, and that goes into the fibers. It softens them up. It's like adding conditioner to your hair when you wash your hair. It softens them up. They become really pliable again. I'll leave that in there for a few days, and then I'll wash that thoroughly with liquid dish soap and some warm water, then let it dry. Wipe that off on some paper towel. Once it's thoroughly dry, you're good to go again. Brushes generally last me years and years. However, sometimes when we're using something like a synthetic pointed round, like a 00 synthetic ivory round, one of my favorite detailing brushes, they'll start splaying apart maybe after 2 or 3 paintings. But then once that happens,
I'll never throw a brush away. I'll use it for a different detail technique. So I'll start chopping off those little stray hairs that start doing this. Synthetic fibers don't seem to last as long as the natural bristles, but they're something that I can continue to shape and use and manipulate as time goes on. And my rule is I never throw a brush away. I've got every brush I ever bought, even if there's no hair left on it, it's just a handle. I can't throw it away. I've got drawers full of brushes. I got thousands of brushes here in the studio. Even old brushes when I first started painting, they're still sitting there in the drawer. They look like heck, but they're still there. The other thing I will say, this came up in a live stream yesterday for when I was on Patreon, and I was talking to my folks there, and the cleanliness in the studio is paramount. I mean, a lot of us oil painters are using things like lead, cadmium, cobalt. And I've seen so many people with such hideous studio painting habits. I never get any paint on me at all. I'm wearing my good flannel shirt. I don't get any paint on this. I don't get any paint on my hands. Don't get much paint on my jeans unless I happen to drop a brush because I'm not holding onto it very tight. Sometimes I'll drop a brush. It'll hit my shoe or my jeans or whatever. But I don't really get it on me. And that's the other thing is I keep those handles really clean because we absorb so much through our skin. Accidents happen, but not allowing that paint to draw up into the ferrule and not getting in the habit of blending with my finger and never touch the painting with my finger. Never. No. Because the minute you do that, you start to get all those dangerous things that you've been using. I get people tell me all the time, hey, is it dangerous? Is it toxic to paint with oil paint? I said, yeah, if you brush your teeth with creme that's white, yes, it's dangerous. Don't do that. Yeah. Don't get it on you. You're just fine.
Yeah, I know some folks who've had cadmium poisoning, directly from either eating a sandwich and they've got paint on their hands and they've eaten it, or they've got cracks in the sides of the fingers. I think for anybody who's worried, just wear some gloves. If you're not 100% sure, just wear gloves. But especially when it comes to brush cleaning, if you're quite meticulous when you actually paint, but you're worried about that side of things, just put a pair of gloves on, and you can reuse the gloves or just get some that you can, So another question then.
Exactly.
Another question specifically about the brushes that you're using, and it's kind of my final question about brushes, is what is the reason between you favouring the ivory daggers and then the Tish daggers? What's the synthetic to natural run alongside, and what are you expecting from each of them differently?
Yeah, good question. So I use both heavily in my process. What I find is that in building up the image in terms of block in and modeling, see, I've got a 3-phase or 3-part process, blocking in, modeling, then detail. And I work in layers. Because I'm using alkyd resins, my paintings are drying pretty quickly between stages. So when I come to the painting the next day, it's dry, I begin adding a fresh layer on top of that. And that allows me to build up texture and details and manipulate tones and all that stuff. I'm not much of a direct painter. I borrow some things from those direct alla prima guys, and I'm watching very closely. I'm insanely inspired by a lot of what they can do. But due to the nature of the material, it's drying pretty fast. So I find to build up that image, I'm using those daggers, the bristle daggers, the Tish daggers, more than anything else. And for the most part, I'm using like some great big fat ones to block in with big, bold, expressive strokes. And I've seen some painters that would just leave their painting there, and that's fine. I've even had people look at those block-ins and go, hey, leave it there. That's great. It's expressive. It's loose. It's not really my style. But once I built up a little bit of a surface, a little bit of a tooth, but not too much texture, it's still pretty thin, then I'll start to reduce the size of the bristle dagger and then apply my modeling layer with a little bit more of a definition of forms and tones, a little bit more rendering, a little more manipulation there. But then finally, that final layer, that's when the synthetics start to come out. So I'll use a 00 pointed round, and I'll also use like a tiny little ivory dagger, about 1/8 inch, sometimes a 1/4 inch I'll use as well. And they're
beautiful brushes because of the precision of those lines and shapes that you can get. So let's say I was painting, recently I was painting like a rock scene with those big chunky boulders that are accumulated in this stream, in this big glacial valley. So it's just all these boulders are being channeled into this one little, crevice. And so I'm just painting the water kind of trickling through this big accumulation of rocks. So after I get the big chunky bold brush strokes, defining the rocks and the reflected light, those highlights, then I go about carving around the shadows between rocks. And I do that with a very thin amount of paint using a glazing technique, keeping my glazes nice and dark, and then carving out precisely where those shadows are going, and like these series of interlocking shapes that define those big boulders through negative space. And it's just perfect using those ivory synthetic daggers for that part of the process. So it's really something. I mean, if I'm painting a portrait, it's perfect for things like hair. That is one of my favorite brushes for detail, is that synthetic dagger. When you load that brush just right, it's like a razor blade. You drag it through, and like say I was painting hair on a portrait or eyelashes or what have you, any kind of detail like that requires a fine thin line, or say branches on a tree, that may be a bare tree in winter, and I've got branches that are catching that early morning winter sunlight. I'll just drag that through, and it would just give me just a crisp line as if it was applied with a razor blade. It's an awesome brush. Yeah.
I'm really glad you've cleared that up, because I didn't, for one, know that you would use, from larger to smaller, depending on the layers that you're going through, and then obviously at the end then. So I can now start saying to folks, Andrew's using the ivory daggers in the latter stages. And especially because the Tisch dagger itself isn't going to hold its shape in nature like the ivory would. And I think it's really important that people know that, that there is a difference. And if you do want a brush that's going to hold its shape and a super sharp edge, you go for the ivory. If you want something that's more organic in its nature, that, like you said, sometimes less hairs is more, because you can hold more paint and then form that stroke. That's then what the Tisch was, the missing loop,
Yeah. Well, do you mind, Simi, if I give a little plug here? Because just speaking about this specifically, if people follow me on Patreon, I put out a lot of exclusive content on Patreon. Not only a weekly live stream, but once a month I'll put up a Patreon exclusive tutorial. So, I always try to price my tutorials very reasonably, but like for $10 a month, New Zealand dollars. So I think it's, I don't know, £8-9 or whatever it ends up being, maybe way less than that actually, in the UK. But just check it. But on Patreon, every month I put up an exclusive tutorial. So that rock tutorial I was talking about is right there as an exclusive that people can watch anytime when you sign into Patreon. You can have access to that tutorial. But the next tutorial that we're about to bring out for next month is an alla prima portrait that was painted in one sitting over 3 hours of my buddy Wayne, who's this amazing looking dude with this real character in his face, bald shaved head with the most spectacular beard you ever seen, fantastic mustache. Man, I wish I could grow facial hair like that. It's just there. And I was working out, like, how am I going to paint this dude? And I painted the entire thing with bristle Tisch daggers. The entire thing. Wow. And loose expressive brushstrokes. And maybe by the time this goes out, people will see a post of that on my Instagram page. But if you want to know how I painted that, and using those brushes, then you'll be able to see that. What I'm going to do with that portrait specifically, though, is I filmed the first part of it, made a complete tutorial all about that. And then what we're going to do is a part 2, and I'm going to show how to layer over the top. And we're actually going to be talking about some of these different brushes that you use throughout that process of actually really breaking that down, step by step, and showing people, there's particular tools for the job. And it's a conscious, it's not just about having a bunch of brushes of different shapes. Mm-hmm. There is a reason for that tool. There is a reason it is that fiber. There's a reason it's that size. And it's all about the quality of the mark that we can get. And every artist is going to have their own preferred method. I'm not saying that I got the right way. It's just a way. But I'm such a fan of systems and methodology that I needed to find a way that I could teach. And so, with this, the thing I'm excited about with this portrait demo is that you want to know how to use that dagger, or how I use it. Man, it is dynamite. But even, it might not have as much precision as an ivory dagger, but it will leave the most painterly brush marks. So even in a confined space, when you're trying to chisel out some bright highlights on the side of the face, you know, you can still, with a small, like say, quarter or a half inch dagger, you can just knock in these chisel marks there and just have that. Just,
yeah.
It's awesome. It's an awesome brush.
Do you know, I think of all the brush sets we have, you've really tried to condense it for folks to say, okay, if you paint portraits, this is what I use. It's not what you have to use, but at least it's a suggestion. And it's the same with landscapes or for plein air. You know, I know that you have the Dulux set that everybody wishes that they could own, you know. But then there's something like the intro set that's just got the teasers. It's just showing you a bit of what you can have, you know. So if anybody hasn't seen those, equally you should check them out. But I'll make sure that I post below all the links that Andrew's put. Now, I'm conscious that this is going to be really long, but I don't care. And it's going to take a while to upload onto YouTube and for people to condense and probably write notes about, I hope, at home. But, you know, I think I can't thank you enough for being so honest. It's refreshing for sure, but it's also difficult, you know, when you sometimes are exposed to you know, tell us the real, Andrew, tell us the real problems that you've had, and you know, and everybody wants to, but it you know, I really appreciate that, and I know for a fact a lot of the people that watch this will all say, wow, you know, this guy really has come from here to here, and he's done it the hard way. So I hope that that's what this will have shown off as well. And I still
appreciate it.
I totally stand by the fact that everybody needs a Rachel in their life. I really can't say that enough. But I'd love to invite you back sometime, because I know that we've only just touched the surface. I mean, I've still got about 8 questions that I didn't get to ask you.
Well, anytime. Listen, anytime. This was such a pleasure, and it, absolutely, you know. And on that, you know, kind of trying to be, you know, ruthlessly honest about things. I realized pretty early on, you know, if you're going to be on social media, especially if you're going to be on YouTube or you're going to have a podcast or what, you know, any inconsistency that shows up, if that's something that presents itself, it's because I'm a changing work in progress, and my philosophy changes the older I get. But I you know, I guess you got to be real, you know, don't you? And this is the thing that social media and the internet does. Is it does expose us. We're out there for the masses to consume, but you know, I love people, man. I love to help, and I just, you know, want to thank you for giving me the opportunity as well to talk to you and again to meet you. We've been working, you know, and I've been talking about the brushes, and I've been promoting the brushes. It's what I use here in the studio, and we've talked a bunch over email, but I've never had the pleasure of speaking to you over Skype. So this has been a lot of fun.
I know, and I want to say my mum wishes she could be here. And I wanted to end it on one thing. I know we touched on it in the middle, and I purposely planted it there. But I know that you said that you don't do any in-person workshops anymore. But if you did, what I would love to do is welcome you to Yorkshire, because I know for a fact a ton of people over here would love to learn from you. Even though we'd all love to travel to New Zealand, Yorkshire might be a little bit closer for them. So that's an open invite to you, Andrew, and to your wife, Rachel, that you're always welcome. My home and wonderful. Is your home. So.
Wow. And likewise, you know, I remember vaguely there was something on the cards about you guys coming down to New Zealand at one point.
This year, I was going to head out there this year.
Look, hey, Mikasa Sukasa, you know, whenever you're down here, come on down. We'd love to have you. And I appreciate that too. I'm itching to get to the Rosemary & Co. headquarters. Yeah. And listen, how about this? Next live workshop, if I ever teach another live workshop, the next one I'll do will be at Rosemary & Co. How about that?
Yay! That'd be amazing. There's one rule though. You need to bring with you some wine from my favourite region that's not far from you.
Well, is it Marlborough? The Marlborough region or Central? Oh, Marlborough. Fantastic. Yeah, good wine there.
It's my favourite, and I know that you're close. But that's amazing. Wow, that's made my evening. Andrew, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great week.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.